happy spring. You might not be able to tell it from the amount of sweatshirts I'm wearing because it's still a little chilly, but spring is finally arriving, and that means it's time to start thinking about our gardens. If you're like us who like to start your plants from seeds, it helps you save a lot of money over buying the plants at the store. But that being said, still better off to buy plants at the store than to not have a garden at all because you'll still save quite a bit of money. But if you're starting plants, um, I guess either way, whether you're starting plants from seeds or buying your plants at the store, you will have to have some idea of how many of each type of plant you want, what you want to grow, and kind of just looking at your space. So whether you have garden beds, raised garden beds, planters, you'll want to have kind of an idea of how you're going to lay things out. So today we're going to look through a few options for getting your garden laid out and getting you started off on the right foot.
Okay, so there's a few options you can use if you're going to lay out your garden. There's a few online ones you can use. This one is Gardena or Gardena, however you want to say it, but My Garden. So it's kind of nice. It just lays out this like, CAD style program, and we can pick lawns, earth, paving, whatever. So if I pick a garden bed and I don't like that you can't just click and drag right away. You actually have to like click on the spot. So it's not the most user friendly, but it's still pretty good. But we can come here and just create a rough bed. Obviously, this isn't totally straight. Like I said, it's not my favorite for that aspect. But you can really get a feel for your space. Another thing that then you can come in here and look at your flowers and your grass, pots, fruits, vegetables, stuff like that. Um, Again, this isn't my favorite one. You can see there's very limited options for the vegetables. Most of us with gardens are going to want to grow more than tomatoes, cucumbers, cabbage, carrots, potatoes, and cauliflower. Like say maybe beans or peas or potatoes are on here. Peppers. So this one seems kind of limiting from that side standpoint. But it is kind of nice that you can kind of come in here and move these around. Um, and you can turn the grid on and off. You can have different items. You can have different surfaces. So that's one of them, and I'll be sure to put these links in the video description. Another one that you can look at is this. It's called Garden Planner, and it's through smallblueprinter.com. And this is kind of the same thing where you can create your garden beds and then come in and say, need to pick a square. This is going to be my garden bed, and then I can come over here and actually enter my measurements. And you can change your settings to get US or metric, so we can change this to feet now. And then when we go to objects, you can see there's a few options. So you can get vegetables, herbs, flowers, anything like that. This one has a few more options here, or a lot more options. So you could come through and then do something like that and kind of plan it out this way. Again, this is kind of nice to have a visual, fairly user-friendly. It's all online. It's free. You can download it for 15 days for free. So that is another option. Two more I will go through is you can go through the Farmer's Almanac, and they have a planner that you can use for free for 7 days. I tried this out before planning to do the video, so I do not have a trial anymore, but it looks and acts pretty much the same as the other two that I showed you. I don't like that this one does charge you. It just seems, I don't know, like all you're trying to do is lay it out, so it doesn't make sense to me necessarily, especially when it's like $30 a year to lay this out. So then your final option for on the computer, I found you can use a CAD program. So if you have AutoCAD or something, you can just lay out the measurements of your garden. If you don't, you can go ahead and get something like Tinkercad and do something like this where you can get your basic shapes. We'll do a box, something like that, and you can actually change the shape of this. So we can get this huge thing, we can get the width to 0. Okay, let's say this whole thing is our garden. Or we want it to be, whatever. You can adjust it. And then you could do something like, okay, the cones are going to represent my tomato plants here. And that too will have a radius of 1. So you can kind of see how that looks. And then this one, you can actually turn it around. So that's kind of fun about this, is it definitely is like 3D and whatever. You won't have the vegetables in here, but you can kind of lay it out how you want. You can see all these nice grid marks in here, so you can do that for a square foot gardening. Another option, which is what we chose to do, is a little more basic. So bear with me here as I switch you over. All right, so you can see me again. We're gonna flip you down to look at our garden planning. So if we look at it this way, you can see I just have graph paper here. And what I did was I went through and figured out my spacing for all of our plants. So this kind of darker, raise you up again, trying to see all of it. This darker black line on the edge over here, and this one signifies the area of our garden. So each one of these squares will be 1 foot. So in our case, we have a 32 foot by roughly 17 foot garden. So that is how we started. And then we went through and said, okay, our kale here, if you can kind of read that, they need to be 12 inches apart within the row, and the rows need to be 18 inches apart. So when we look at that, we can go over 1.5. It's 18 inches is a foot and a half. We find lettuce. Lettuce needs to be 4 inches apart and 12 inches between rows. Well, since this one is 18 inches and this is 12 and they're 18 inches apart, it works. So we went through and laid it out this way of assuming that if it is written in the row, it is right in the middle of the row, like you can see with the leeks and the lettuce. Brussels sprouts are in the middle. We kind of drew a line in there to note where they are, and just laid this out using this square foot method of separating our rows. So this is how far apart our rows will be. And you don't need to be necessarily exact once you get out to planning. But it is really nice to have this kind of thing laid out so you know how many plants you can fit in your garden and optimize that space. We actually a lot of times will just take a tape measure out too, because it seems like when you have these itty bitty, the plants are only a couple inches tall and you really just want to squish them together because you're like, why did we leave 2.5 feet on either side of our Brussels sprouts? This seems insane. We don't need 2.5 feet. And then by July and August, you're like, wow, why did we only leave a foot? We can't even walk through here. This is terrible. So this is how we kind of like to lay it out. And what you're seeing with the two different sides is this first side was our kind of initial laying it out, and then our second side, I didn't redo the lines, but we wrote in more what we wanted because we decided that we wanted to add a few things like fennel and kohlrabi, as well as some sweet potatoes. So that is really how we laid it out. And the reason we reformatted where these were, so we start out with a list of plants and then kind of pick where they go. How we pick where they go is by doing something called companion planting. So I'll switch you back over again here to our display capture. And what we do with that, I can pull it up here perhaps. There's a lot of sites that'll show you companion planting, but what I did is I just made a really quick spreadsheet. You can see I didn't quite finish it for the recording today, but I said the different kinds of plants, how far apart they need to be spaced. You might want to add a column if you want the information of spacing within rows. Let's say kale is supposed to be 12 inches between plants, but 24 inches between rows. And this one is actually 18 to 24. So you can go play by ear with that. So we did that and then picked which ones we wanted. And we kind of rated ours of which ones we wanted to grow first. Then if we had extra room, we could add in the second tier vegetables that we wanted. So then we have our spacing. Next, we looked at a lot of these can be planted by a lot of things. So we didn't necessarily look at that as much, but we did look at this avoid planting near. So if we look at kale, you're supposed to avoid planting it near tomatoes, strawberries, pole beans. So that's what we took into account with our plan of not placing those things right next to each other. Kind of the same as lettuce here. Don't plant it right next to your broccoli or your cabbage. We found that out kind of the hard way last year of both our lettuce and our broccoli didn't do very well. And so what the point of companion planting is, and you can see I have a few notes over here if we extend that out, that lettuce, if you plant it next to radish, tenderizes the radishes. And potatoes and marigolds help repel the Mexican bean beetles. And so you can just see, and here you don't want to plant kohlrabi next to tomatoes because they'll stunt each other. So there's just a few things to look at. A lot of these things, they can deter the pests that come with the other plant, or they can just kind of help improve flavor, promote growth. On the other hand, they can also stunt the tomatoes. They can kind of battle each other, which will make your plants not do well. So like I said, this is just a quick look. A good way to find this out, since I'm not going to give you everything right here, but you can kind of look of, let's say you're planting tomatoes. You can just type in tomatoes companion plants and you'll come up with a whole bunch of options here. Like the Farmer's Almanac is a good one. You can also find that through a lot of research facilities will post things. But like we have here, beans. They're really great with all of these things, but don't plant them next to garlic, onions, peppers, or sunflowers. Just because, like I said, they'll fight each other or they can help each other. Tomatoes are great to go with some herbs, so it's great to keep in mind. They can help promote growth. You can get a lot more things in your garden, and they won't be fighting each other, making it easier for you to work with. So once you have kind of your plan, like we showed you, the next step is going to be looking at when to start them. So I'm using garden.org here, as you can see. Obviously, this will change depending on your location. Here you can type in your location and see if it fits for you. Like I said, once you have that kind of laid out either online or on paper, depending on which one you like to look at, I'm doing paper. So I can look at how many plants fit in my row. And come through and say, okay, beans, I do not have to start those inside. I can sow those outside. What else? Broccoli, that was on my list. So I need to start my broccoli inside. So then I can go back to, we'll just move you over a little bit here and get our video capture going. You can kind of see here, we have our broccoli, and we can count that to find out that we can fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 broccoli plants in our garden, so we know that we will need to start 8 plants indoors. And you'll plant those according to the directions, usually 2 seeds in each container. Sometimes you're able to save the seedlings that you thin out, but we're starting 8 of those. Brussels sprouts, we need to start those indoors. Cabbage will probably start indoors. So you can just kind of see this is a nice way to go through and see when you should be starting this. Or then when you can transplant outside. A lot of these dates they show on here are rather early for how our spring has shaped up. We've never been able to get out into the garden before May. So these April dates are really optimistic, which it means you can adjust these sow seeds indoors based on your last frost, basically. So our last frost, I would say, will probably be around May 1st, which tells me that these shouldn't go out there until May 1st. So we can move everything back about a week or so, two from the dates they have listed. And then it also tells me when I can sow my seeds outside. So for any of the indoor ones, we'll go ahead and start those in planters. And if you're not really sure how to do that, be sure to check out our video on how to start those. And like I said, this will change depending on where you live. So let's say the famous 90210, right? Let's see how that changes. Beverly Hills, right? Frost is not an issue. Plant whenever you want. So obviously, you know, it can change depending on where you are. So that's kind of nice to use this calculator. I'll also link that. Otherwise, if you don't like that one, there's another one on the Farmer's Almanac. We can kind of see this one looks a little bit more realistic to me. There's still quite a few April days in here, but you can see most of the outdoor dates are in May. So this one is a little bit closer. So we might use this one. It shows you planting dates based on the frost and on the moon. Again, you can change your zip code. Here it's saying our frost-free date is May 10th. So just kind of a neat way to look at it. If you have questions, feel free to comment down below. Check out some of the links in the video description. Otherwise, be sure to join us for more information about starting your plants, hardening them off, and then when we go ahead and plant our garden.